The door didn't slam. That was the first thing that unsettled him. It didn't close with anger. It didn't echo with dramatic finality. It simply clicked shut, soft, controlled, almost gentle. And somehow that quiet sound was louder than any scream. He stood there for a moment, staring at the space where she had just been. The air still carried the faint trace of her perfume. The room still held the warmth of her presence. The couch cushion was slightly indented where she had sat minutes before. Hands folded in her lap, eyes steady. Not angry, not hysterical. Not begging. Just done. He had expected tears. He had prepared for accusations. Maybe even a fight. He was ready to defend himself, to explain, to justify, to deflect. But he wasn't ready for peace. He wasn't ready for her to look at him with calm acceptance and say, "I can't do this anymore." There's something about calm goodbyes that pierces deeper than chaos. Chaos gives you something to react to. Anger gives you a role to play. But calm? Calm leaves you alone with yourself. First, he didn't feel anything dramatic. No cinematic collapse. No desperate chase down the hallway. His body remained still. His face remained composed. If anyone had walked in at that moment, they would have thought he was fine. And that's the illusion. Because what he didn't realize in that first minute, in that first hour, was that something inside him had just been unplugged. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the air change? Not because of temperature, not because of sound, but because someone who once filled that space with invisible energy is suddenly gone? It's subtle at first. A stillness that feels unnatural. A quiet that doesn't soothe, it presses. It expands. It settles into the walls and waits. He sat down on the couch. The same couch where they had laughed over late-night jokes. The same couch where arguments had stretched into emotional marathons. The same couch where she once rested her head against his chest, tracing absent-minded circles on his arm while talking about her dreams. Now it felt foreign. Too big. Too empty. He reached for his phone instinctively. Not to call her. Not yet. Just to scroll. To distract. To prove to himself that life was continuing normally. Notifications. Messages. Memes. News. Everything moved. But inside him something had stalled. He told himself this was for the best. She was too emotional. She overreacted. She'll cool down. She always does. That's how the mind protects the ego. It minimizes the loss before the heart can measure it. But here's the truth most men don't admit, especially not to themselves. They don't feel the loss immediately. Not fully, because shock is merciful. Shock creates a temporary numbness, like a layer of ice forming over a deep lake. From the surface it looks solid, stable, controlled. But underneath the water is moving. And the moment she's gone, the first crack begins. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, closed it. He wasn't hungry. He just didn't know what else to do. It's strange how routines suddenly feel meaningless without the person who shared them. Who do you text when something mildly funny happens? Who do you send that random photo to? Who do you tell about the frustrating email from work? He didn't notice how many small emotional threads connected him to her, until they were cut. And that's the beginning of suffocation. Not dramatic, not explosive, gradual, like oxygen thinning in a room you thought was fully ventilated. He sat back down and stared at the door. She had always been the one to soften arguments, the one to check in after silence, the one to say, "Are we okay?" He had grown used to that safety net, to her willingness to bridge the gap. And without realizing it, he built his emotional stability on her consistency. So when she walked away without slamming the door, without threatening, without pleading, he didn't just lose her presence. He lost the reassurance that she would always stay. And that realization doesn't hit like lightning. Creeps in. Slowly. Hours later when the apartment feels too quiet. Later still when he reaches across the bed and touches cold sheets. Later still when his phone screen stays dark longer than usual. Let me ask you something. Why is it that absence feels heavier at night? Why does silence become louder when the world slows down? Because during the day there are distractions. At night there is truth. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The room felt larger somehow, as if the walls had expanded. The darkness wasn't peaceful. It was pressing against him. He replayed her last words. Not the dramatic ones. The simple ones. "I'm tired." That's what she said. Not tired of him. Just tired. Tired of trying alone. Tired of explaining the same pain. Tired of hoping he would understand without being told twice. And suddenly, for the first time that day, something tightened in his chest. A small contraction. A quiet panic. Because deep down, beneath pride, beneath logic, beneath ego, he knew something irreversible had happened. There's a moment after someone leaves when you assume they'll come back. It's almost automatic. She just needs space. This is temporary. But what if it's not? What if this time her calm wasn't emotional exhaustion, but emotional closure? That's the thought he avoided. Because if he lets that thought fully form, the ice cracks faster. He turns to his side, closes his eyes, and for the first time the silence isn't neutral. It's accusatory. It asks questions he doesn't want to answer. Why didn't you listen when she cried quietly instead of loudly? Why did you assume her patience was permanent? Why did you mistake her understanding for tolerance? The door didn't slam, but something inside him did. And he doesn't know it yet, not completely, but the moment she walked away, his soul began adjusting to the absence of the one person who mirrored him, challenged him, grounded him, and loved him beyond his defenses. He thought he needed space. Now space feels like deprivation. He thought silence meant peace. Now silence feels like pressure. He thought he could breathe on his own. But tonight, as he lies in a room that feels too big, too still, too quiet, he feels something unfamiliar. Not heartbreak. Not yet. Something more primal. Like the first hint of suffocation. And the most dangerous part, he still tells himself he's fine. But if he's fine, why does the quiet feel like it's closing in? Why does the air feel heavier? Why does her absence feel louder than her presence ever did? This is the moment he didn't expect. Not when she was arguing. Not when she was crying. But when she stopped. When she became calm. When she chose herself. That is when the real shift begins. Because sometimes love doesn't end in chaos. It ends in clarity. And clarity is what forces a man to sit alone in silence, with the echo of everything he took for granted. The door didn't slam, but his soul heard it anyway. The next morning, he wakes up before his alarm. For a split second, there's confusion, a strange stillness. Then memory returns, not as an explosion, but as a quiet reminder. She's gone. He doesn't sit up dramatically. He doesn't stare at the ceiling in despair. He simply rolls over, grabs his phone, and begins scrolling. Emails, notifications, sports updates, group chats. Life continues, and that continuity becomes his shield. I'm okay, he tells himself. It's not that deep. He showers, gets dressed, looks in the mirror. His reflection doesn't look broken. It looks normal, composed, functional. That's the dangerous part about emotional detachment. It often disguises itself as strength. Because what is strength, really? Is it the ability to feel nothing? Or is it the courage to admit you do? He chooses the first version. At work, he moves through his tasks with mechanical precision. Replies are sharp, efficient, almost overly focused. Productivity becomes his anesthetic. When a coworker asks, "Everything good?" he responds instantly, "Yeah, all good." And he believes it, at least partially, because the human mind is incredibly skilled at compartmentalization, especially when pride is involved. He doesn't call her. He doesn't text her. He doesn't check her social media. Not immediately. That restraint feels powerful, feels controlled, and control feels like dignity. But here's the illusion. Silence can either be peace or avoidance. He tells himself he's giving her space. But is he really giving her space? Or is he protecting himself from the possibility that she won't respond? There's a subtle difference. One is maturity. The other is fear disguised as pride. By afternoon, he starts filling his schedule. He agrees to drinks with friends. He says yes to a gym session he normally would have skipped. He even considers downloading a dating app. Not because he's ready, but because he needs proof. Proof that he still has options. Proof that he's not the one who lost. It's strange how quickly the ego reframes heartbreak as competition. She'll realize. She'll come back. I'm not the only one who can't move on. But if he's so certain, why does he keep glancing at his phone between conversations? At the bar that night, he laughs louder than usual. His stories are animated, his posture confident, his jokes sharper. From the outside he looks energized, free even. One of his friends nudges him. Bro, you're better off. She was too intense anyway. He nods. That's what I'm saying. And for a moment the validation feels good. It reinforces the narrative that he's unaffected. But later, when the laughter fades and the noise dissolves into the quiet hum of his car engine, something shifts. The silence returns. Not dramatic, just present. He unlocks his phone. No message from her. A tiny flicker of disappointment passes through him. He quickly masks it. She said she was done. What did you expect? He throws the phone onto the passenger seat as if it offended him. But the truth is more fragile. He expected her to reach out, because she always did. That's the part no one sees, how deeply he relied on her emotional persistence. He didn't have to fight for connection before. She did the emotional labor. She initiated reconciliation. She softened tension. So when she doesn't, it feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar feels uncomfortable. But instead of naming that discomfort as grief, he labels it irritation. She's being dramatic. She's trying to teach me a lesson. The ego loves to villainize what it secretly fears losing. Days pass. He maintains the performance. Gym selfies. Busy schedules. Minimal mention of her. If her name comes up, he shrugs casually. It is what it is. But let's pause here. If it truly is what it is, why does he avoid driving past her street? Why does he hesitate before deleting her photos? Why does he type her name into the search bar, then delete it before pressing enter? Because denial is not absence of feeling. It's delayed confrontation. At night the cracks widen. He lies in bed longer before sleeping. Music plays softly in the background, not because he loves the song, but because he can't handle complete silence. He tells himself he just misses the routine. Not her. Just the routine. But is that true? Was she just habit? Or was she emotional grounding? There's a difference between missing comfort and missing connection. Comfort is replaceable. Connection is not. And deep down he knows what they had wasn't superficial. That's why he's working so hard to act unaffected. Because admitting the depth would mean admitting vulnerability. And vulnerability feels dangerous. Especially when you were the one who let her walk away. He considers texting her. Just something simple. Hope you're okay. Neutral. Safe. But he stops. Why? Because if she replies coldly, it confirms distance. If she doesn't reply at all, it confirms loss. And both outcomes threaten the illusion he's carefully constructed. So he chooses silence. But silence doesn't remove emotion. It amplifies it. The illusion of strength begins to crack in subtle ways. He becomes restless. Small things irritate him more than usual. He scrolls longer than necessary. He replays conversations in his head. Not the arguments, but the softer moments. The way she laughed when she was genuinely surprised. The way she would squeeze his hand absent-mindedly. The way she looked at him when she felt safe. He shakes the thoughts away. Stop overthinking. But the mind doesn't obey commands so easily. Here's the uncomfortable truth. He thought losing her would feel like freedom, but it feels like withdrawal. Because when someone becomes intertwined with your emotional regulation, when their presence calms your storms and grounds your chaos, their absence feels destabilizing. And instead of saying, I miss her, he says, I just need time. Time for what? Time to feel? Or time to avoid feeling? He convinces himself he's moving on quickly, that he's built differently, that he doesn't cling. But strength without emotional honesty is just armor. And armor is heavy. The illusion starts fading the moment he catches himself smiling at a memory, then immediately frowning because it hurts. That emotional contradiction is the first sign. If he truly didn't care, there would be no internal conflict. Indifference is simple. This is not simple. This is layered. This is a man trying to outrun his own attachment. He goes to bed again, phone face down. But just before sleeping he flips it over. Checks one last time. Nothing. and that nothing feels louder tonight. He exhales sharply, rolls onto his back, stares at the ceiling, still telling himself, "I'm fine." But if he's fine, why does his chest feel tight when he thinks about her laughing with someone else? Why does the idea of her healing without him feel threatening? Why does the possibility of her not looking back feel suffocating? Because the illusion of strength only lasts until reality pierces pride. And pride can delay grief, but it cannot erase it. The moment she walked away, something began unraveling. He just hasn't stopped long enough to see it yet. He thinks he's standing strong, but in truth he's standing still. And beneath the surface of confidence, distraction, and control, his soul is slowly running out of air. There is a moment in every deep connection that no one talks about. It's not the first kiss. It's not the first "I love you." It's not even the first fight. It's the silent energetic agreement that forms somewhere beneath the surface, the unspoken synchronization of two nervous systems, two emotional rhythms, two souls learning how to breathe in the same space. And the moment she's gone, that rhythm collapses. First, he doesn't notice it consciously. There's no flashing warning sign, no visible crack in the ground beneath his feet. But something subtle shifts, like the hum of electricity in a room that suddenly cuts out. You don't always hear it stop, but you feel the stillness it leaves behind. When she was there was an energetic exchange happening constantly. Not just words. Energy. The way she sensed when he was stressed before he said anything. The way her presence softened his mood without effort. The way conversations flowed, even in silence. Even their arguments had energy, charged, alive, dynamic. Now, it's quiet in a way that feels unnatural. He wakes up on day 3 and feels off. Not devastated. Not broken. Just unbalanced. Like something is slightly misaligned inside him. He moves through his routine again. Coffee, shower, work. But there's a subtle emptiness underneath everything. A faint dullness, as if colors are slightly less vivid. Have you ever lost something so integrated into your life that you didn't realize how much it regulated you? Not controlled you. Regulated you. There's a difference. Control feels external. Regulation feels internal, like breathing. And that's the metaphor that begins forming inside him, though he doesn't articulate it yet. Feels like he's missing oxygen. Not dramatically gasping for air, but breathing just a little shallower than before. When she was present, there was emotional circulation. Energy flowed. Even when they weren't speaking, there was an invisible tether between them. A knowing that someone out there held his emotional blueprint in their hands. She understood the version of him that the world didn't see. And that understanding created safety. Now that tether feels quiet. And quiet can be terrifying. He tries to ignore it. He increases distractions. More time at the gym. Longer work hours. Louder music. But distraction doesn't restore energetic connection. It only masks its absence. One evening, he's driving home when he suddenly reaches for his phone, instinctively wanting to call her and tell her about something small that happened during his day. He stops himself mid-motion. The realization hits. There is no one to call. Not because there aren't other people in his life, but because there's no one who occupies that space. The one who responded not just to his words but to his tone. The one who felt shifts in his energy without explanation. That's when the shift becomes undeniable. There is a difference between loneliness and energetic withdrawal. Loneliness says, "I wish someone was here." Energetic withdrawal says, "The person who stabilized my emotional frequency is gone." He starts noticing physical sensations. A subtle tightness in his chest. Restlessness at night. An inability to fully relax. First he blames stress, work pressure, sleep cycle. But deep down he knows this tension isn't logistical. It's relational. When two people are deeply bonded, whether through intense love, trauma bonding, or something that feels spiritual, their nervous systems sync. Science calls it co-regulation. Spiritual traditions call it soul connection. Whatever the label, the effect is the same. When one leaves, the other destabilizes. He didn't realize how often he relied on her voice to calm him. How often her reassurance settled his racing thoughts. How often her presence made him feel anchored. And now, without that anchor, he feels slightly adrift. Not sinking, Not yet, but drifting. He begins checking her social media, casually at first. Just curiosity. He wants to see if she looks sad, if she looks like she's struggling, if there's evidence that she feels the shift too. Because if she feels it, then he's not alone in this invisible suffocation. But what if she looks peaceful? What if she looks lighter? That possibility unsettles him more than anything. Because if she looks lighter, it means the energy between them wasn't oxygen for her anymore. It was weight, and that realization stings. He starts replaying moments when she said she felt emotionally drained. When she said she was tired of explaining herself. When she asked for consistency. He had heard the words, but he hadn't felt the urgency. Now in her absence he feels it. And here's the paradox. When she was present, her emotional intensity felt overwhelming. Now that she's gone, the absence of her energy feels suffocating. How can both be true? Because intensity feels heavy when you're resisting growth. Absence feels heavy when you're confronting loss. He sits alone one night, lights off, phone silent. The room feels different. Not physically. Energetically. It feels uncharged. Like the emotional current that once moved between them has dissipated. He whispers her name under his breath. Not dramatically, not theatrically. Just to hear how it sounds in the quiet. It sounds distant. And that distance feels wrong. He thought love was about physical proximity. Now he realizes it was about energetic resonance. She didn't just occupy space in his life. She occupied space in his internal world. And that space is now hollow. He feels it most when he's still. Because movement distracts. Stillness reveals. He begins to question himself. Why does her absence feel heavier than her presence ever did? Why does the quiet feel louder now? Why does breathing feel slightly incomplete? Because he's no longer co-regulated. He's alone with his own emotional storms, storms she once helped soothe. And for the first time he realizes something humbling. He wasn't as independent as he thought. Not emotionally. Not energetically. He had leaned on her stability more than he admitted. And now, without it, he feels exposed. This is the stage where ego starts losing its grip. Because ego thrives on distraction. But energy doesn't lie. The body knows. The chest tightens. Sleep fragments. Thoughts loop. He misses her, yes. But more than that, he misses how he felt around her. Grounded. Seen. Regulated. And that's when the suffocation becomes more noticeable. It's not panic. It's depletion. Like running on lower oxygen levels without understanding why you're tired. He finally sits in silence long enough to admit a small truth. Something changed the moment she walked away. Not externally. Internally. An energetic cord didn't just snap. It went quiet. And in that quiet, he begins to feel the weight of everything he didn't appreciate when it was still flowing. The energy shift is subtle, but it's powerful. Because once you feel the absence of someone who once stabilized your emotional world, you can't unfeel it. And now as he lies in the dark, chest tight, mind restless, pride slowly thinning, he begins to understand something terrifying. He thought he could breathe on his own. But maybe he had been breathing her in all along. It doesn't happen all at once. The memories don't storm in like a tidal wave. They seep. Quietly. Strategically. Almost politely. First, he thinks he's in control of his thoughts. He avoids certain places. Skips certain songs. Keeps conversations surface level. He believes that if he doesn't invite the memories in, they won't come. But memory doesn't need permission. It hides in the ordinary. And that's what makes it dangerous. He's walking into a cafe one afternoon. Not even their cafe, just a random one near work, when he hears a laugh behind him. For a split second, his body reacts before his mind does. His shoulders straighten. His heart jumps. His head turns instinctively. It's not her. But the reaction lingers. Why did his body respond like that? Because memory isn't just mental. It's physical. It's cellular. The brain stores emotional moments with sensory detail. Scent, sound, tone, texture. So when something remotely similar appears, the body lights up like a switchboard. Later that night, he hears a song playing in a grocery store. It's not even one of their songs. But she used to hum it absent-mindedly while cooking. And suddenly he's not standing in a grocery aisle anymore. He's back in the kitchen. She's barefoot, music low in the background. She's pretending to dance badly just to make him laugh. He remembers how he rolled his eyes but smiled anyway. He remembers how safe that moment felt. And that's when it hits him. The smallest memories hurt the most. Not the dramatic fights. Not the tearful conversations. The ordinary Tuesdays. The casual touches. The routine "did you eat yet?" texts. Because ordinary moments are proof of shared life. And shared life is harder to erase than dramatic endings. He tries to shake it off. Keeps walking. Keeps functioning. But something has shifted. Memories are no longer controlled flashbacks. They're ambushes. Driving past a street corner triggers a scene of her in the passenger seat, arguing about directions. Seeing a hoodie draped over a chair reminds him of the way she used to steal his. Smelling a perfume in an elevator makes his chest tighten. The mind is ruthless when it wants to confront you. And here's the cruel paradox. When she was present, he sometimes tuned out the little things. Now those little things are amplified. Why does absence magnify value? Because the mind fills in what reality no longer provides. When someone is there every day, you normalize their presence. When they're gone, your brain highlights every detail you overlooked. He begins replaying conversations. Not to argue, not to justify, but to understand. He hears her voice in his head saying things he once dismissed. "I just want to feel chosen. Sometimes I feel alone even when you're here. Why is it so hard for you to open up?" At the time, those sentences felt like pressure. Now they feel like missed opportunities. And regret is heavier than anger. Anger pushes outward. Regret folds inward. He starts questioning himself. Why didn't I listen more carefully? Why did I assume she would always stay? Why did I think there was unlimited time? Memory doesn't just replay events. It reframes them. He remembers a night she cried quietly beside him. He had been tired, irritated, distant. He told himself she was being too sensitive. Now, in hindsight, he sees something else. She wasn't being dramatic. She was reaching, and he didn't reach back. That realization doesn't break him immediately. It lingers. It echoes. It waits for stillness. One evening, he opens his photo gallery, not intentionally searching for her, just scrolling. But there she is, smiling into the camera, eyes bright, looking at him like he was her favorite place. He stares longer than he planned to, zooms in without meaning to. There's something haunting about photos. They freeze moments that no longer exist. Proof that something was once real. Proof that it wasn't imagined. He tells himself he's just reminiscing. But why does his throat feel tight? Why does he swipe away quickly as if the image burns? Because memories are oxygen and poison at the same time. They remind him of connection, but they also remind him of loss. He begins noticing how often she appears in his thoughts uninvited. While brushing his teeth, while waiting at a red light, while lying awake at 2 a.m. She doesn't appear as a villain, not as the girl who left, but as the girl who laughed at his dumb jokes, the girl who believed in him during his uncertain phases, the girl who memorized his coffee order. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The mind rarely replays someone's flaws after separation. It replays their warmth. Why? Because distance filters conflict. Time edits memory. The brain softens rough edges and sharpens tenderness. And that's when the suffocation deepens. Because now he's not just missing her. He's missing the version of himself that existed with her. He felt more open then. More connected. More alive. Was it her? Or was it who he became around her? That question lingers. He tries distraction again. But memories are patient. They wait for cracks. And the cracks appear at night. In the dark. When there's nothing left to scroll. He closes his eyes and sees flashes. Her face turned toward him while half asleep. Her hand resting on his chest. The way she looked at him during moments of vulnerability. Like she saw something in him he didn't fully see himself. And that look? That's the one that haunts him most. Because it wasn't admiration. It was recognition. She recognized his potential. Even when he resisted it. Even when he hid behind sarcasm and emotional distance. She saw through him. And now, without her presence reflecting that depth back at him, he feels unseen. Memory is not just about longing, it's about confrontation. Every remembered moment asks a question. Did you value this when it was happening? Did you show up fully? Did you love courageously? He doesn't like those questions, but they don't stop. He begins to realize something profound. He is not haunted by her absence. He is haunted by awareness. Awareness of what he had. Awareness of what he didn't nurture. Awareness that love doesn't disappear suddenly. It fades when neglected. He thought she was intense. Now he sees she was intentional. He thought she was demanding. Now he sees she was devoted. And the most painful realization? She didn't leave impulsively. She left after trying. After hoping. After waiting. Memory replays not just the good moments but the warning signs. And that's what suffocates him. Because the past cannot be edited. He can replay it. He can reinterpret it. But he cannot relive it. That's the torment of the haunted mind. It doesn't allow closure without reflection. It doesn't allow peace without accountability. And as the days pass, he finds himself less focused on distraction and more trapped in memory. Because when someone leaves your physical space, they often move deeper into your mental one. He thought silence would bring relief. Instead, silence brings flashbacks. He thought time would blur her image. Instead, time sharpens it. And the most unsettling part? The memories are no longer random. They are instructive. They are pointing towards something. Growth, awakening, or regret. He hasn't decided which one yet. But one thing is clear. She may be gone from his life, but she is everywhere in his mind. And every memory is another reminder that sometimes you only understand the depth of what you had when your thoughts refuse to let it go. There comes a point where distraction stops working. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, like a wall that has held firm for days, beginning to show hairline fractures. Up until now, he has survived on pride. Pride told him he didn't need to reach out. Pride told him silence was power. Pride told him that if she walked away, she would feel it more. Pride is convincing like that. It whispers strength while quietly feeding fear. But pride has one fatal weakness. It cannot survive prolonged honesty. And honesty arrives when exhaustion sets in. By the end of the first week, he feels it. Not heartbreak in the cinematic sense, but emotional fatigue. The kind that seeps into his posture. The kind that makes even small decisions feel heavier. He sits alone one evening, phone in his hand, staring at her contact name. Not calling, not texting, just staring. Why? Because this is the moment pride begins negotiating with longing. Don't do it, pride says. If she wanted to talk, she would have reached out, pride argues. You'll look weak, pride warns. But another voice, quieter, less polished, begins to surface. What if she's hurting too? What if you misunderstood her exhaustion? What if this silence isn't strength, but distance growing permanent? That's the first crack. Because now the narrative isn't as clean as before. He used to think, she left. That's her choice. Now he wonders, did I push her to that choice? That shift is dangerous for the ego. Because ego thrives on blame. But growth begins with accountability. He replays their last serious argument in his head. Not from his perspective this time. From hers. He remembers how she tried to explain her feelings calmly. How she paused between sentences, choosing her words carefully. How she said she didn't want to fight. She wanted understanding. At the time he heard criticism. Now he hears vulnerability. And that realization unsettles him. Because if she wasn't attacking him, then what was he defending himself against? Sometimes pride doesn't protect us from others. It protects us from self-examination. And now, self-examination is unavoidable. He scrolls through old messages. Reads conversations he once skimmed past. He notices patterns. Her asking for reassurance. Her initiating emotional check-ins. Her apologizing, even when she wasn't fully at fault, just to restore peace. How did he miss that? Or maybe the harder question, why did he ignore it? There's a specific moment when ego begins collapsing. It's not when you miss someone. It's when you realize you contributed to losing them. That's when pride feels heavy instead of empowering. He leans back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The illusion of control is slipping, because control requires certainty, and now he isn't certain anymore. He thought she would come back. He thought she needed him more than he needed her. But what if that wasn't true? What if she left because she finally realized she deserved more? That thought hits harder than rejection, because rejection wounds the ego, but being outgrown wounds identity. He stands up abruptly, pacing the room. He feels restless, not angry, not exactly sad, just exposed. Because pride once acted like armor, now it feels like weight, and he begins questioning something he never questioned before. Why is it so hard for me to admit I was wrong? Why did vulnerability feel like weakness in the relationship? Why did I withhold softness when she offered hers freely? These questions don't have immediate answers, but they signal something significant. The ego is no longer in full control. He picks up his phone again, types her name into the message bar, stops, deletes it, types again. Hey, deletes it again. Why is something so simple so terrifying? Because reaching out means surrendering the illusion of power. It means admitting he misses her. It means risking the possibility that she has already emotionally moved forward. Pride says, wait. The heart says, move. This internal conflict grows louder each day. He notices how often he imagines scenarios. What if she meets someone new? What if she laughs with someone else the way she laughed with him? What if she stops thinking about him entirely? Those thoughts tighten his chest. Not because he wants to possess her, but because he's beginning to understand her value. And value recognized too late is a painful teacher. He sits quietly and finally whispers a sentence he's avoided. I messed up. Not out loud, but internally. And that admission shifts something fundamental. Because ego collapse isn't dramatic. It's humbling. It's quiet. It's the moment you stop defending yourself and start reflecting honestly. He realizes something uncomfortable. She didn't leave because she didn't love him. She left because loving him became exhausting. That realization cuts deeper than anger ever could. Because anger can be dismissed. Exhaustion cannot. He remembers how she once said, I don't want to fight for basic emotional safety. At the time he thought she was exaggerating. Now he understands. She wasn't asking for perfection. She was asking for presence. And he offered distance. He sits with that truth longer than he wants to. And for the first time since she left, he doesn't distract himself. He doesn't scroll. He doesn't turn on music. He just sits. And in that stillness, pride softens. He feels smaller. Not diminished. Just humbled. Because ego collapse doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. It shows you the parts of yourself you hid behind confidence. It exposes insecurities masked as indifference. It dismantles the story that you were fine. He begins to see how often he avoided emotional depth because it felt overwhelming. How often he chose silence instead of conversation. How often he relied on her emotional strength instead of building his own. And here's the hardest realization. She didn't leave to hurt him. She left to protect herself. That reframes everything. Because now, reaching out isn't about winning. It's about accountability. But accountability requires courage. And courage requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is what he avoided from the beginning. He looks at his reflection in the mirror that night. There's no dramatic breakdown. No tears. Just awareness. And awareness is heavier than denial. He finally understands. The silence he maintained wasn't strength. It was fear of exposure. Fear of rejection. Fear of needing someone deeply. But needing someone deeply isn't weakness. Pretending you don't is. The ego collapses in layers. First the certainty cracks. Then the blame dissolves. Then accountability surfaces. And now he stands at the edge of a decision. Does he cling to pride and risk losing her completely? Or does he surrender the illusion of strength and show up honestly, even if it means admitting he was wrong? This is the turning point. Because once pride cracks, transformation becomes possible. But transformation requires action. He sits on his bed, phone in hand once more. This time he doesn't type immediately. He breathes. And for the first time since she left, he doesn't ask, how do I look strong? He asks, how do I show up real? That's the moment ego collapses fully. Not when he breaks down, but when he chooses truth over image. And whether he reaches out tonight or not, something fundamental has shifted. Because the man who thought silence was power now understands that sometimes silence is surrender. And pride? Pride was never strength. It was protection. And protection, when held too long, becomes isolation. There is a kind of connection that feels different from the beginning. Not louder, not more dramatic, just deeper. The kind where conversations stretch for hours without effort. Where eye contact feels like recognition instead of curiosity. Where silence isn't awkward, it's charged. When he first met her, he didn't have language for it. He just knew she saw him. Not the polished version he showed the world. Not the confident exterior he had perfected. But the unfiltered parts, the doubts, the ambition, the unresolved wounds he rarely admitted to himself. And she didn't flinch. That was the first mirror. Because most people love you for how you perform. Very few love you for who you are beneath performance. She had a way of asking questions that went past surface-level answers. How are you? Wasn't small talk with her. It was an invitation. What are you afraid of? What do you actually want? Why do you shut down when things get intense? At the time, those questions felt intrusive. Now, in her absence, they feel sacred. Because she wasn't interrogating him. She was reflecting him back to himself. There's a reason certain relationships feel catalytic. They don't just comfort you. They awaken you. She mirrored his potential. The version of him that was emotionally open, expressive, capable of depth. But she also mirrored his shadows, avoidance, defensiveness, pride. And here's the uncomfortable truth about mirrors. They don't just show beauty. They show distortion. When she reacted to his emotional distance, he thought she was being demanding. But what if she was responding to a part of him he refused to confront? When she expressed frustration, he labeled it as sensitivity. But what if she was reacting to inconsistency he normalized? Mirrors don't create flaws. They reveal them. And that revelation is rarely comfortable. That's why intense connections can feel overwhelming. Because they accelerate self-awareness. He begins to replay moments where she held him accountable. Not harshly, but clearly. Moments when she said, I feel like you're here physically but not emotionally. At the time he felt accused. Now he realizes she was observing. She saw when he retreated into himself. She noticed when he used humor to avoid vulnerability. She recognized the walls he thought were invisible. And instead of ignoring them, she gently tried to break them down. Why did that feel threatening? Because vulnerability requires exposure. And exposure feels dangerous when you've built your identity around control. But she didn't fall in love with his control. She fell in love with his depth. The depth he only showed in glimpses. Late at night. In rare moments of softness. In quiet confessions when he forgot to guard himself. She saw who he could be. And that kind of recognition is powerful. Almost spiritual. Some people believe certain connections are random. Others believe they are aligned, timed encounters designed to trigger growth. Call it a soulmate dynamic. Call it a twin flame. Call it psychological compatibility. The label doesn't matter. What matters is this. She didn't just love him. She challenged him. And now, without her present, the mirror still exists internally. He hears her voice in his mind when he reacts defensively. He remembers her expression when he shut down emotionally. He recognizes patterns he once denied. The mirror didn't disappear when she left. It internalized. That's what makes her absence heavier. Because now he can't avoid his reflection. When she was there, he could argue. He could deflect. He could blame miscommunication. Now, he sits alone with clarity. And clarity is unforgiving. He starts to understand something profound. She wasn't just part of his life. She was part of his awakening. She reflected both his wounds and his worth. She exposed where he lacked emotional maturity. But she also affirmed his capacity for love. That dual reflection is rare. Most relationships either comfort your ego or threaten it. This one did both. And that's why it felt intense. Because she loved him deeply, but refused to accept less than growth. When he pulled away emotionally, she didn't beg endlessly. She communicated. When he minimized her feelings, she explained. When he resisted accountability, she held her ground. Not to control him, but to maintain her self-respect. And now, looking back, he sees something he missed before. She wasn't trying to change him. She was inviting him to evolve. There's a difference. Change feels imposed. Evolution feels chosen. But evolution requires awareness. And awareness often arrives through loss. He sits in silence one night and asks himself a question he avoided before. Was she just a lover? Or was she a catalyst? Because catalysts don't always stay. Sometimes they enter your life to ignite transformation and leave once the lesson is presented. That thought both comforts and unsettles him. Comforts because it gives meaning to the pain. Unsettles because it suggests this separation might not be random. Maybe it's necessary. He remembers how she used to say, "I just want us to grow together." At the time, growth felt abstract. Now it feels urgent. Because without growth, the connection couldn't survive. He begins to see how often he projected his fears onto her. His fear of inadequacy. His fear of vulnerability. His fear of not being enough. Instead of confronting those fears internally, he reacted externally. With distance. With silence. With pride. And she mirrored that back. Not by attacking him, but by responding to it. Her frustration wasn't random. It was a reaction to emotional absence. And that realization humbles him, because it reframes everything. She wasn't too much. She was responding to not enough. Not enough presence. Not enough reassurance. Not enough openness. And she asked for those things repeatedly, not aggressively but consistently, until she stopped asking. That's the moment he didn't understand. When her intensity softened into calm. When her attempts shifted into acceptance. He thought calm meant peace. But calm was detachment. And detachment happens when someone stops hoping for change. Now, in her absence, the mirror is clearer than ever. He sees how often he relied on her emotional strength. How often he expected her to carry the depth of the relationship. How often he confused emotional restraint with maturity. And here's the paradox. The more he resists growth, the more suffocating her absence becomes. Because she represented expansion. And without expansion, stagnation feels heavier. He starts asking himself deeper questions. Why did emotional intimacy feel overwhelming? Why did I withdraw when she leaned in? Why did her love feel intense instead of safe? Those questions don't have quick answers. But they signal something transformative. He is no longer blaming. He is reflecting. And reflection is the beginning of evolution. She may not be physically present, but the version of him she awakened refuses to disappear. He can either suppress that version, retreat back into comfort and pride, or he can honor the mirror she held up, honor the growth she invited, honor the depth she saw, because sometimes the greatest gift someone gives you isn't their presence. It's self-awareness. She didn't just love him. She revealed him. And now, as he sits alone with that revelation, one truth becomes undeniable. The suffocation he feels isn't just from losing her. It's from confronting the parts of himself she exposed. And whether she returns or not, he cannot unsee what she reflected. And that reflection? It might be the most important turning point of his life. There comes a point when distraction no longer works. The noise fades. The friends go home. The phone stops buzzing. The night stretches long and unmerciful. And that's when it hits him. Not loudly. Not dramatically, but slowly, like air thinning in a sealed room. First he calls it stress, then he calls it loneliness, then he calls it overthinking. But what he's really experiencing is something far deeper. It's the suffocation of a soul that has lost its oxygen, the quiet that becomes heavy. In the beginning, he thought silence would bring peace. No more arguments, no more emotional intensity, no more feeling exposed. He believed space would make him stronger, but now the silence isn't peaceful. It's heavy. It presses against his chest at night when he lies in bed staring at the ceiling. It echoes in the empty passenger seat of his car. It lingers in the corners of his apartment where her laughter once lived. Have you ever noticed how absence has weight? How something invisible can still feel crushing? He doesn't understand why the air feels thicker, why breathing feels different, Why his chest tightens when he sees her name pop up in an old message thread. He thought he needed distance from her. So why does distance now feel like deprivation? When numbness turns into anxiety, first he felt nothing. That was his shield. He told himself, I'm fine. He told his friends. It was for the best. He convinced himself that detachment meant maturity. But numbness is not healing. Numbness is delayed pain. And eventually it cracks. The cracks start small. He wakes up in the middle of the night for no reason. His mind replays conversations he thought he'd forgotten. His body feels restless, like it's searching for something it can't name. Then the anxiety begins. Not loud panic. Not dramatic breakdowns. Just a subtle, constant tension. A tightness in his chest. A shallow breath. An ache behind his ribs. He doesn't say it out loud, but deep down he knows. This is what grief feels like. But it's not just grief for her. It's grief for who he was when he was with her. She was his emotional oxygen. Here's the part he never admitted. She regulated him. Her presence softened his edges. Her voice calmed his storms. Her belief in him strengthened his fragile confidence. He thought he was strong on his own. But strength borrowed from love can feel like it's yours, until it's gone. When she left, she didn't just take her body out of his life. She took the mirror. She took the reassurance. She took the emotional grounding he didn't realize he depended on. Imagine someone breathing clean air their whole life without noticing it. Now imagine that air slowly being replaced with something thinner. First, you don't panic. You adjust. You normalize it. But over time, your body begins to struggle. That's what happens when the soul loses its emotional oxygen. He begins to realize that she wasn't just someone he loved. She was someone who made him feel alive. And without that feeling, everything feels slightly faded. The night it truly hits him. There's always a night. One specific night. Maybe it's raining. Maybe it's completely silent. Maybe it's just an ordinary Tuesday. But something shifts. He scrolls through old photos. He lingers on one longer than he should. Her smile in that picture wasn't posed. It was real. And suddenly, the truth lands in his chest like a weight. She loved me. Not casually. Not temporarily. Not conditionally. Deeply. And what did he do with that love? Did he protect it? Did he nurture it? Did he cherish it? Or did he assume it would always be there? That's when the suffocation intensifies. Because now it's not just missing her. It's confronting himself. The body keeps the score. Heartbreak is not just emotional. It's physical. His appetite changes. His sleep becomes fragmented. Music sounds different. Food tastes dull. His body reacts to her absence as if something essential is missing. Because to the nervous system it is. Love creates chemical bonds. Safety. Attachment. Familiar rhythms. When those bonds are severed, the body doesn't instantly adapt. It protests. It aches. Searches. That tightness in his chest? It's not weakness. It's withdrawal. The restlessness? It's longing without a destination. The sudden waves of sadness? Their unprocessed realization. He is not just missing her presence. He is detoxing from connection. The moment he understands. And then the hardest realization arrives. She wasn't suffocating him. His fear was. His pride was. His avoidance was. He once felt overwhelmed by her depth. He once felt pressured by her emotional intensity. He once thought space would give him relief. But now he sees it differently. What he called pressure was her desire for honesty. What he called too much was her authenticity. What he called overthinking was her intuition. And now the only suffocation he feels is from the emptiness she left behind. Isn't it ironic? Sometimes we push away the very thing that keeps our soul alive. Alone with his truth. In this phase, there are no more excuses. No more distractions strong enough to drown it out. Just him. And the truth. He begins to see patterns. How he withdrew when things got vulnerable. How he stayed silent when he should have spoken. How he waited for her to fight for the relationship instead of fighting for it himself. The suffocation forces clarity. And clarity can be brutal. Because it strips away the story he told himself. It replaces it with accountability. He can't blame timing anymore. He can't blame circumstances. He can't even fully blame her. He must sit with the possibility that he let something sacred slip through his hands. The breaking point, suffocation, always leads to one of two things: collapse or awakening. Some men shut down completely at this stage. They numb out harder. They bury themselves in work. They chase temporary highs. Others pause. They feel it. They let it break them open. Because here's the hidden truth. The soul suffocates not to destroy him. It suffocates to wake him up. Pain is an alarm. And this alarm is screaming. Pay attention. Grow. Change. Don't lose yourself again. A question for the viewer. Let me ask you something. Have you ever lost someone and only realized their value when the silence became unbearable? Have you ever mistaken comfort for control and depth for danger? What if the suffocation you feel after someone leaves isn't punishment? What if it's revelation? The turning point hidden in the pain. This phase feels dark, feels endless, feels unfair, but it is also sacred. Because this is the moment where ego dissolves and the soul speaks. This is where he decides. Will he remain a man who runs from depth? Or will he become someone capable of holding it? The suffocation isn't just about her absence. It's about the version of himself he must now confront. And sometimes, losing her is the only thing strong enough to force that confrontation. In the next part, we'll explore the crossroads he faces. Will he chase her out of fear of emptiness? Or will he transform so he never feels this suffocation again? Because pain can either make him desperate or make him powerful. And the choice changes everything. There is always a moment after the suffocation. A moment when the pain stops being just pain and starts demanding a decision. He can't stay in limbo forever. He can't keep pretending he doesn't feel it. He can't keep drowning in regret without choosing a direction. This is the crossroads. And it is far more serious than it looks. Because the path he chooses here doesn't just determine whether he gets her back. It determines who he becomes. The urge to run back. The first impulse is almost instinctive. Reach out. Text her. Call her. Show up. Say the words he couldn't say before. I miss you. I was wrong. Can we try again? But pause for a second. Why does he want to reach out? Is it love? Or is it the discomfort of being alone? Is it growth? Or is it fear of suffocation? There's a difference. And it matters more than he realizes. Because chasing someone out of fear is not the same as returning with maturity. One is desperation. The other is evolution. From the outside they look similar. But energetically they are worlds apart. Path 1, chasing her out of fear. Let's explore the first path. He decides the emptiness is unbearable. He convinces himself that having her back will fix everything. So he reaches out. His voice trembles slightly. His messages are longer than usual. His pride lowers just enough to ask for another chance. And maybe she responds. Maybe she agrees to talk. Maybe she even misses him too. But here's the hidden danger. If he hasn't changed internally, the same patterns will return. The avoidance. The emotional shutdown. The pride battles. The miscommunication. Because pain alone does not equal growth. Suffering is not transformation. Without reflection, without accountability, without inner work, reconciliation becomes repetition. He may get temporary relief from the suffocation, but relief is not healing. It's like putting a bandage over a wound that still needs stitches, and eventually the wound reopens, often worse than before. Have you ever seen couples break up, get back together and break up again? That's what happens when fear drives the return. The illusion of, I can't live without her. At this crossroads, his thoughts can become dramatic. I can't breathe without her. She was my everything. I'll never find someone like that again. But here's the truth he must confront. If he truly cannot function without her, that isn't love. That's dependency. Love inspires strength. Dependency creates panic. There's a subtle but powerful difference. When he says, I need her, is it because she complements his life? Or because she regulates emotions he hasn't learned to regulate himself? If she was his emotional oxygen, then the real work is learning how to breathe on his own. Otherwise, even if she comes back, he will suffocate her with expectations. And that will push her away all over again. Path 2. staying still and transforming. Now let's explore the harder path. The quieter one. The one that doesn't offer instant relief. He doesn't text her. He doesn't chase. He sits with the discomfort. He lets the suffocation teach him instead of running from it. This path requires brutal honesty. He asks himself, why did I pull away when things got deep? Why did vulnerability feel threatening? Why did I assume she would always stay? He begins to see that love exposed parts of him he wasn't ready to face. His fear of abandonment, his fear of inadequacy, his fear of losing control. And instead of blaming her intensity, he examines his resistance. That is transformation. Not dramatic declarations, not grand gestures. Inner reconstruction, growth in silence. Transformation rarely looks impressive from the outside. There are no fireworks, no applause, just quiet discipline. He reads, he reflects, he perhaps even seeks therapy or guidance. He reconnects with parts of himself that he neglected. He learns how to sit with emotion without shutting down. He learns how to communicate discomfort instead of withdrawing. He learns that strength is not dominance, it's openness. This process is uncomfortable, sometimes even lonelier than the breakup itself, because now he cannot blame her for his pain. He must own it. But something shifts. The suffocation slowly eases, not because she returned, but because he expanded. He built internal oxygen. The unexpected power shift. Here's the paradox. The moment he stops chasing her from fear is often the moment his energy changes. Desperation repels. Grounded confidence attracts. When he no longer reaches out to fill emptiness, but instead to offer stability, that's when connection can become healthy again. And sometimes something even stranger happens. He realizes he doesn't need to chase at all. Not because he stopped loving her, but because he loves himself differently now. He understands that if it's meant to reconnect, it will happen from alignment, not panic. And if it doesn't, he will still be whole. That is power. Attachment versus growth. At this crossroads, he must understand something crucial. Attachment says, I need you so I don't feel pain. Growth says, I choose you because I am whole. Attachment clings. Growth stands. Attachment fears loss. Growth trusts timing. So the real question becomes, does he want her back? Or does he want to become the man who could love her properly? Those are not always the same thing. The courage to let her go, temporarily or permanently. Sometimes transformation requires distance. Not punishment, not pride, but space to evolve separately. If their connection was deep, truly deep, it will not disappear. It will either reconnect at a higher level, or teach them lessons that prepare them for healthier love elsewhere. But chasing from fear interrupts that process. It tries to control the outcome instead of allowing growth. And love that is controlled becomes suffocating. Ironically, the very suffocation he feared feeling alone can become the suffocation she feels when he returns unchanged. The defining question. At the center of this crossroads is one defining question. Is he willing to become uncomfortable long enough to become better? Because transformation is not quick. It is not glamorous. It is not instant reconciliation. It is months of self-awareness. Moments of resisting the urge to text her. Moments of choosing maturity over ego. Moments of admitting, I was wrong. But not just saying it. Understanding it. Embodied growth is attractive. Not because it wins someone back, but because it changes the trajectory of a life. What this crossroads really represents. This isn't just about her. It never was. It's about whether he will continue repeating unconscious patterns, or break them. It's about whether he will continue blaming circumstances, or develop emotional depth. It's about whether pain will shrink him, or refine him. The suffocation was the alarm. This crossroads is the response. A question for you. If you were standing at this exact moment, heart aching, pride cracked, soul exposed, would you run back for relief? Or would you rise for growth? And if you're watching this because you've been the one who left, are you willing to let him grow? Because sometimes separation is not rejection. It's preparation. In the next part, we'll uncover the deeper truth behind all of this. Why loss is often the catalyst for awakening. why separation can be divine timing, and why sometimes he only finds himself after losing her. Because this story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about evolution. And evolution always begins at a crossroads. There is something about loss that strips a person down to their rawest form. Not the dramatic kind of loss. Not the kind people post about for sympathy. But the quiet, internal kind. The kind where no one really knows how deeply it hit you. The kind where you smile during the day, but unravels slowly at night. When she left, he thought the worst part would be missing her. He was wrong. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It wasn't the empty bed. It wasn't even the memories. It was what her absence revealed. Because loss has a strange power. It exposes. It illuminates. It awakens. The shattering of illusion. Before she was gone, he believed he had control. Control over his emotions. Control over the pace of the relationship. Control over how much he revealed. He thought he could love halfway and still receive fully. He thought he could delay vulnerability without consequences. But loss shattered that illusion. When she was there, he had options. He could postpone hard conversations. He could withdraw and assume she'd wait. He could prioritize everything else and assume she'd understand. When she left, those options disappeared. And with them, the illusion of control. Isn't it strange how we only recognize the value of something when access is removed? Availability creates complacency. Absence creates clarity. Pain as a catalyst, not a punishment. At first, he interpreted the pain as punishment. I messed up. I ruined something good. I'll never get another chance. But what if pain isn't punishment? What if it's a catalyst? Pain interrupts autopilot. It forces attention. It demands reflection. Think about it, when things are comfortable, growth is optional. When things fall apart, growth becomes necessary. Her departure disrupted his patterns. The emotional walls he thought were protection now feel like prisons. The pride he once admired now feels isolating. The independence he clung to now feels lonely. Loss has a way of rearranging priorities. What once felt urgent, work status, distractions, fades. What once felt secondary, emotional depth, connection, presence, becomes central. And suddenly he begins asking different questions. Not, how do I get her back? But, why did I struggle to love fully in the first place? That shift is awakening. The mirror effect of deep connection. Some connections are casual. They touch your life lightly and leave gently. Others shake you. They expose insecurities you didn't know you had. They highlight potential you didn't believe in. They trigger fears buried for years. She wasn't just someone he dated. She was a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable. They reflect both beauty and flaws. When she loved him, she reflected his potential. When she challenged him, she reflected his wounds. And instead of embracing that reflection, he sometimes resisted it. Because growth is uncomfortable. But now that she's gone, the mirror hasn't disappeared. It's internalized. He sees the patterns more clearly. How he shuts down when emotions intensify. How he avoids conflict instead of resolving it. How he confuses vulnerability with weakness. Her absence amplifies that awareness. Because there is no longer distraction. Just reflection. The awakening through regret. Regret is a powerful teacher. Not the toxic kind that spirals into shame. But the honest kind that whispers, you could have done better. Regret, when processed correctly, doesn't destroy a person. It refines them. He begins replaying moments not to torture himself, but to understand. The time she asked for reassurance and he brushed it off. The time she expressed fear and he minimized it. The time she needed presence and he chose distance. Each memory becomes a lesson. Painful, yes, but clarifying. Because now he sees the cost of emotional immaturity. And that cost wasn't just losing her. It was losing the version of himself he could have become beside her. The identity shift. Here's the deeper transformation most people don't talk about. Loss doesn't just change your relationship status. It changes your identity. Before he was us. Now he is just me. And in that space he must redefine himself. Who is he without her affirmation? Who is he without her emotional grounding? Who is he when no one is there to soften his edges? This is where awakening truly begins. Because he can either or rebuild the same identity with someone new, or evolve into someone deeper, wiser, more emotionally capable. Awakening isn't dramatic. It's subtle. It's choosing honesty over ego. It's recognizing patterns instead of repeating them. It's sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. The paradox of losing to find. There's an ancient paradox in love. Sometimes you only find yourself after losing someone who felt like home. While she was there, he defined himself in relation to her. Her reactions influenced him. Her emotions affected him. Her expectations shaped him. Now, alone, he must define himself internally. And in doing so, something powerful happens. He stops seeing love as something that completes him. He starts seeing love as something that complements him. Completion implies lack. Complement implies wholeness. That shift changes everything. Divine timing or harsh reality. There's a question that lingers in moments like this. Was this just a mistake? Or was it necessary? Some separations happen because love wasn't strong enough. Others happen because growth wasn't ready enough. Sometimes two people meet before they're fully capable of sustaining what they feel. And the separation isn't rejection. It's preparation. If he had kept her without evolving, the relationship may have slowly deteriorated. Resentment could have grown. Emotional distance could have widened. Instead, loss interrupted that slow decay. It forced immediate awareness. Painful, yes, but purposeful. Awakening is not about winning her back. Here's where many people misunderstand awakening. It's not about strategy. It's not about becoming better to impress her. It's about internal alignment. If he evolves solely to regain her, he's still operating from attachment. But if he evolves because he recognizes the necessity of growth regardless of outcome, that is true awakening. Because now, whether she returns or not, he has changed. And change rooted in awareness does not disappear. It reshapes future love. It reshapes communication. It reshapes emotional capacity. The moment of acceptance. There comes a moment in awakening where resistance fades. He stops fighting the reality of what happened. He stops replaying what-if scenarios. He stops blaming her for leaving. Instead, he accepts, "I wasn't fully ready." That sentence holds humility, not weakness. Humility. And humility is the foundation of emotional maturity. In that acceptance, something remarkable happens. The suffocation eases. Not because he no longer loves her, but because he no longer resists the lesson. Resistance creates suffering. Acceptance creates growth. A question for you. Have you ever lost someone and later realized the loss changed you for the better? Have you ever looked back and thought, "That breakup hurt, but it forced me to grow"? What if the pain you're experiencing right now isn't the end of a love story, but the beginning of a more conscious version of yourself? The hidden gift in loss. Loss strips away illusion. It removes comfort. It forces confrontation. But it also offers a gift. Clarity. Clarity about what you value. Clarity about how you love. Clarity about who you need to become. And sometimes that clarity is worth the heartbreak. Because the man who emerges from true awakening is not the same man who lost her. He is softer, stronger, more aware, more capable of depth. And whether their paths cross again or not, he will never love the same way again. Not carelessly, not half-heartedly, not unconsciously. Because once loss awakens you, you cannot return to sleep. What this journey really means. How love transforms from attachment into wisdom. And why sometimes, the moment she's gone is not the end of his story. It's the beginning of who he was meant to become. By now the storm has passed. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough for him to see clearly. The suffocation, the silence, the regret, the crossroads, the awakening. None of it was random. None of it was meaningless. It was initiation. Because sometimes, love doesn't enter your life just to stay. Sometimes it enters to transform you. And the moment she's gone is the moment the lesson begins. Love was never the enemy. Let's correct something important. Love did not suffocate him. Her depth did not suffocate him. Her presence did not suffocate him. His ego did. His fear did. His emotional immaturity did. It's easier to blame love than to confront ourselves. It's easier to say, "She was too much." than to admit, I wasn't ready. But here's the truth most people avoid. Real love doesn't suffocate. It expands. What suffocates is resistance to growth. What suffocates is avoidance of vulnerability. What suffocates is pride standing in the way of connection. When she left, it felt like she took his air. But in reality, she removed the mask. And suddenly he had to breathe on his own. The difference between attachment and love. This journey revealed something deeper than heartbreak. It revealed the difference between attachment and love. Attachment says, stay so I don't feel empty. Love says, be free and I will still choose you. Attachment clings out of fear. Love stands out of strength. When he felt suffocated after she left, it forced him to ask, did I love her? Or did I rely on her? Did I cherish her presence? Or did I depend on her to regulate my emotions? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Because if love is built on dependency, it eventually collapses. But if love is built on wholeness, it becomes sustainable. Growth is the real victory. At the beginning of this story, he thought the goal was getting her back. Now he understands something deeper. The real victory is growth. Growth in emotional awareness. Growth in communication. Growth in vulnerability. Growth in accountability. Whether she returns or not, he is no longer the same man who lost her. And that is powerful. Because too many people repeat the same relationships with different faces, different names, same patterns, same wounds, same endings. But when pain becomes awareness, the cycle breaks. And breaking cycles is evolution. If she returns, let's speak honestly. Sometimes two people find their way back to each other. But when that happens in a healthy way, it's not because one chased in desperation. It's because both evolved. If she returns, it won't be to rescue him. It won't be to complete him. It will be to build with him. And this time he won't love from fear. He will love from clarity. He will speak when something hurts. He will listen when she expresses concern. He will not run from depth, because he understands what it costs to lose it. And if they reunite, it will not be a repetition of the past. It will be a new chapter. Two stronger individuals choosing each other again. But she doesn't return. Now here's the part many people struggle with. What if she doesn't come back? What if the separation is permanent? Then the lesson still stands. Because she wasn't sent into his life only to stay. She was sent to awaken him. Some people are lifetimes. Others are catalysts. Both are valuable. If she never returns, the love was not wasted. The pain was not pointless. The growth was not temporary. He will carry what he learned into the next connection. He will love more consciously. He will show up more fully. He will recognize red flags, in himself and in others. And when he meets someone new, he won't repeat old mistakes. That is how love becomes wisdom. The message for the viewer. Now let's turn this toward you. If you are watching this, maybe you are him. Maybe you lost someone and only realized her value in the silence. Maybe your pride kept you quiet. Maybe your fear kept you distant. Or maybe you are her. Maybe you were the one who left because staying meant shrinking yourself. Maybe you waited for change that never came. Maybe walking away was the hardest thing you ever did. Whoever you are in this story, here's the message. Loss is not the end of love. It is the refinement of it. Sometimes we have to lose someone to understand what loving properly requires. Sometimes we have to sit in suffocation to learn how to breathe independently. Sometimes we have to break to rebuild correctly. Real love requires readiness. Here's something no one tells us. Love is not enough. Chemistry is not enough. Intensity is not enough. Readiness matters. Emotional maturity matters. Self-awareness matters. Without those, even the deepest connection can collapse under the weight of ego. So if you've lost someone, don't just ask, how do I get them back? What is this trying to teach me? Because that question changes everything. The power of reflection. Take a moment. Think about the last relationship that truly affected you. Not the casual one. The one that changed you. What did it reveal about your fears? What did it expose about your needs? What did it teach you about your patterns? If you can answer those honestly, you are already evolving. And evolution is the real win. Love as a teacher, not a possession. We often treat love like ownership. My person. my relationship, my future. But love is not possession. It is partnership. And partnership requires two whole individuals choosing each other freely. The moment we treat love as something we must control, we suffocate it. The moment we treat love as something we must earn through growth, we elevate it. She was never meant to be owned. She was meant to be appreciated. And when appreciation is delayed, loss becomes the teacher. The moment she's gone, his soul starts suffocating, not because she was his heir, but because her absence exposed where he had not yet learned to breathe alone. And once he learns to breathe alone, he no longer suffocates. He expands. He becomes capable of loving without clinging, of communicating without ego, of staying without fear. That is the transformation. That is the awakening. That is the lesson. If this story resonated with you, don't ignore it. Don't scroll past the discomfort. Sit with it. Ask yourself, where have I loved unconsciously? Where have I let pride win over vulnerability? Where have I expected someone to stay without fully showing up? Growth begins with honesty, and honesty begins with reflection. If this message spoke to your experience, share your thoughts in the comments. Were you the one who left, or the one who realized too late? What lesson did love teach you? Like this video if it resonated. Subscribe for more deep reflections on love, awakening, and emotional growth. And share this with someone who might need to hear it, because sometimes, the most painful endings create the strongest beginnings. And sometimes, the moment she's gone, is the moment he finally begins to become the man he was meant to be.